Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I hope everyone can hear me okay and see me fine. Now, today would be a little different. As you could see, I'm sitting, so I'm a bit relaxed today. I won't be like on the driving seat. I have someone else who would be helping us today. But yeah, I would still be here in the background and I would ask our guest to join us in a minute. Faisal is joining us, and we would be talking about how public presentation is delivered. He has been an avid speaker and been delivering lots of sessions all over the place, and that's why we wanted to hear from him. Now, you may be thinking that why we are talking about whiteboarding. So let me give you a little context so that you are aware that why we have included this particular why we included public speaking as a topic. Now, probably you are preparing for an interview, and if that interview is for a public facing role, there are high chances that in your interview round you may be asked to present something. Like if I'm talking about a solution architect, there are very high chances that they would give you a requirement and then say, okay, let's present it to a board of members. Or maybe if you are preparing for a professional services engineer, then also you may have to walk through the different aspect of implementation. If you are preparing for a technical trainer role like I am in or Parna is in, then it will also require you to present something. So we thought presenting is something which you would obviously be doing, whether intentionally, unintentionally, whether you like it or not. And that is one of the best behavioral skill to have. And that's why we have included this particular session on how to present. Now, presenting into a room could be different. Presenting into a public session could be a little different. Presenting virtually can be different. Presenting on stage can be different. And there are various aspects associated with it. And that's why we thought, why don't we ask a seasoned speaker to come and share his learning? So it would be a question answer session. Faisal is having little technical difficulties, so he would be joining us in a minute or so. But we would be listening to him about how his presentation skills were evolved and how he delivers to a broad range of customers all over the world. And that's how we would also probably learn from it. And if you remember, we are into a behavioral track. So if you have any suggestion for the topic, feel free. We would be happy to include those topics. Next week, we would be talking about whiteboarding sessions also. Like whiteboarding is another skill which you would be needing when you're talking to your customer or when you're explaining a solution or when you're designing something. Probably you will start with whiteboard first and then you will move on to your implementation side. So we will be discussing about whiteboarding session also. And there are some personal branding sessions coming up. There are some public art of speaking and art of engagement, and we are also trying to reach out to some recruiters who could help us in understanding the thought process when a resume is shortlisted for a role. So those are our ideas, but we want to give you the content which can make sense to you. So please provide us any feedback, any suggestion for the topic, so we'll discuss that once we finish this section on uh, Faisal's presentation on public speaking, then we would have Prasad. Prasad would help us today in understanding what is how you should select whether I should go for an individual contributor or should I be focusing on being a manager. They both are different role. They may be both having thought leadership, but they may have different aspect or different spectrum associated with it. So we'll also focus on those traits that what you feel should be good qualities for a manager and should be a better way of individual contributor for in the corporate world. So we'll discuss about those topics, right? So hopefully everything would go as planned. We are still waiting for Faisal, and that's why you are hearing me just filling up the gap. But yeah, if you have any questions in between or if you want to share something, feel free, and we will be then hopefully have a better discussion with Faisal. So he just joined. He was here before, but there was some audio issue and that's why he joined back. Let me add him to stream. Let's see if everything works fine. You may good morning, Faisal. Good afternoon,
Hey
in
Ashish,
fact.
I am not sure if the issue is fixed. I tried getting another headset. I'm terribly sorry if it's still echoing.
No worries at all. Means it's working fine. So hopefully it should not be a problem. So welcome, Faisal. Thank you for spending your time on Saturday. And you are based in Hyderabad, right?
That's correct.
How is the weather as of now in Hyderabad?
Well, it's kind of in between. The weather is thinking whether it has to be summer or whether it has to be,
Yeah,
winter. So it's
confused
kind
weather.
of in between.
I get it. All right. So, welcome to BeSA program, and I would like you to introduce yourself formally, and then we will get started with Q&A session.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, if you could introduce yourself, Faisal, like who you are and what your background, little bit.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Faizal Khan. I'm currently working as founder CEO in a couple of companies. One is Ecom India, which is basically a Hyderabad-based company. We're actually an AWS consulting partner. We help customers migrate onto the AWS cloud, basically. Another company also that is based in the US called Excite Logic, which is kind of building something. I can't tell you; it's kind of secret right now,
Oh, you have to
but
kill us otherwise afterward, isn't it?
kind of. Right.
Okay.
So, in this journey, I have kind of been part of the AWS community programs as well. So, I started off with being like a group member for the AWS user group Hyderabad. And I started attending meetups there, got more involved with AWS because job involves AWS as well. So along the way I got to kind of help with a lot of meetups. I got the opportunity to kind of lead the user group in Hyderabad, so that's like the AWS UG Hyderabad, which is kind of the official communities for AWS across India and the globe. Along my way, I did some other programs for AWS as well called the Community Builders. It all kind of came together and culminated on something called an AWS Hero program. So
Wow.
last year, I was thankful and honored to be selected for the AWS Heroes. So I got to become an AWS Community Hero, which is kind of a generalist kind of thing. So there are separate hero categories like hero serverless, hero data, and all of that. So generalist category is kind of the community heroes. So that's where I am.
Nice. Now, I want to understand a little bit before we go into public speaking that what is a user group? What is a AWS user group for sake of some of the audience who are here?
Absolutely. Fantastic question, actually. In fact, this is not something that a lot of people are aware about, and we're having to actively reach out to people to tell them that this exists. So, there is a lot of growth in terms of like tech communities, whether it is AWS or anything else. So, the user group is basically a community. It's a bunch of people that dedicate their time in terms of like doing meetups, doing things like hackathons, larger events, with the base idea that you want to make more people aware about what you can do on AWS and the kind of different technologies that you can work with, any challenges that you're facing. So it's basically about knowledge sharing. You could call it KT in the corporate sense, but
Yeah.
in a community sense, like we all give and take, we learn a lot of things. Like just because I'm the user group lead doesn't mean that I'm only giving. I'm also always listening to a lot of speakers that come to our meetups, the user group meetups, and speak. So yeah, that's basically what a user group does.
Great. And is it something which is endorsed by AWS, or can anyone set up a user group, or you need to get approval or something?
So there has been some changes, but at the initial onset, if there is no user group in your city, then and if you're someone interested in AWS, you can definitely start off a group. And when you do that, obviously there are other user group leaders that you talk to. And eventually you will get connected with the AWS community teams. AWS does have like developer relations or devrels that actually run these programs for communities, and it's a lot more organized nowadays. So there is a little bit of kind of an official format that you have to follow. And at the moment, they do recognize like officially one user group in each city, right? So maybe like 5 6 years ago, Hyderabad did have a couple of user groups, and eventually the one that we were running is what got recognized as the official user group. So yes, there is an official recognition that comes from AWS.
Makes sense. Thank you. Now, that was enlightening information, and probably people would now reach out to their own city user groups and start participating. That is a great way to build your relation as well as build your own knowledge. So, thanks for that. Now, moving to today's discussion on public speaking. So, I have a few questions which I want to go forward with first initially, and I would then open up stage for public to ask question. So that should be there. Now, I want to ask a very basic question here. How a public speaking is different than a meeting which I am conducting?
Very interesting question, and it's a very large, it's an open-ended answer,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Um, right. So when it comes to public speaking, the primary goal that you should always have is, in like I said before, even when you do meetups and things like that, you do kind of knowledge transfer, right? Whether you're doing public speaking or whether you're doing meetings, the primary goal is about you giving as much knowledge as possible to someone else. The difference is, in a meeting, you are essentially just doing that to like 5 people, 10 people, or something like that. But when you're talking about public speaking, you are essentially speaking to a much larger audience, um, and that can be anywhere between 50 people to 500 people in some cases. And with public speaking comes a lot more challenges, because
Mhm.
the format is essentially that you are on stage and you're expected to kind of deliver a certain level of talk. So there are a lot of additional challenges that come with that than just running a meeting where, there are a lot of your peers that are on the same call. They can help you out and things like that. But when it comes to public speaking, it's a little bit different in that sense.
Makes sense. And then I want to go to the next level of question that when you are on stage, you could see people's face, right? And you could read the room and say, these people are engaged or these are not engaged. Hey, everyone is busy with their phone or chatting with each other. Nobody is paying attention to me. Could be whatever reason. Could be you are delivering your best presentation, but the audience is of a different type who was not interested in that topic. So when it happens, how to connect with a large technical audience at of various level, because in a meeting I would know who is coming and what level they carry, but in technical presentation or a large public speaking event, anyone could be showing up. So how I ensure that I am addressing need for the basic audience and on the high level of technical knowledge?
Right. So this is actually a challenge that almost every single speaker faces, right? Um, Even if your actual talk has already been designated to a certain level, for example, with AWS talks, you have the concept of like level 200, level 300, level 400, where 200 is
Mhm.
like a general and 400 is a really advanced, right? And One of the mistake that a lot of speakers do make is that, for example, let's say that your talk is supposed to be a 400 level talk, which is like a very deep technical talk, but then you don't know if your audience is actually a 400 level or not, because when you go to these
Exactly.
events, you have everyone showing up. And especially with events, like, the event organizers want everyone to come. They don't really have the option to tell people that you're not qualified to sit in this talk, right? So everyone shows up. So, as a speaker, it is absolutely essential that you read the room, like you said, and kind of get a quick read to modify your talk, because you might be prepared for giving a 400 level talk with the much details, but you should also have that ability to kind of switch. But how do you make that switch, and how do you decide if you have to do that switch? First is obviously asking a few initial questions with the audience related to your talk. So, for example, if you're talking about, let's say, networking on AWS, right?
Hmm.
You want to throw out a few terms like, how many people have dealt with multiple VPCs, and you might get a few hands raised. Or how many of you are certified on like networking side, you might get a few other hands raised, right? So with that, you can kind of get a little bit of the audience level as to the kind of audience that you're speaking to. But honestly speaking, a lot of people will raise their hands. Like, there might be a lot of people who are certified but not necessarily like deep knowledge. This is where, as you're doing your talk, you actually have to question the audience about what you've talked, what you've just spoken about. For example, let's say you talked about something on the same lines. Let's keep to the networking side on AWS. Let's say you talked about something about VPCs and things like that, right? So as you're talking, just pause for a second and like kind of ask the audience like what you just spoke about, like, so if I do this, what is going to happen, right? So you're kind of getting, not only keeping the audience engaged, but you're also kind of getting that feedback from the audience, whether if they're actually understanding what you're kind of talking, right? It does help in that sense. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that answers the question. Makes sense. Great. Now, engagement is something now people like if I'm talking about events like reInvent or maybe even user group which are like very engaged, there may be multiple session. Maybe your session is scheduled at 4 p.m. in the evening. People are all exhausted by that time, or your session is just before the lunch and people are more in hurry to go to the lunch. So then comes the question, how to increase the engagement level. That's something which see you as a public speaker probably get energy when the room is asking question or interacting or paying attention. If they are distracted, what tips you can give to us that how to increase engagement levels?
Absolutely. So this is obviously everybody's main challenge with any talk is kind of engaging with your audience, right? But as far as the timing, here's what I'll tell you. Here's one thing that you should keep in mind. The more hungrier someone is, the more alert they are. Okay, so if you get
I get
if,
it.
if you get your session just before lunch or like an hour before lunch, then you're actually in a good slot. But yeah, after lunch, kind of things kind of slow
Yeah,
down because now you're full and you're not really alert, right? So
exactly.
right. So engaging with the audience, it's a lot of different ways, right? In fact, I recently was speaking at the AWS Dev Day Hyderabad, and there was the last session that happened for the day, and the speaker kind of did a good thing at the end, which was like, first of all, acknowledging that you have acknowledging the audience that they have sat through the entire day and thanking them for being in their session and sticking through the day, and then after that asking them if they wanted to do some kind of an exercise in order to rejuvenate themselves. So this speaker actually did something where he asked them to stand up and like do some exercise kind of a thing, which helps a little bit, right? So
Yeah,
it's not just one thing, right? But as far as how do you really engage, because doing all of those kind of things are fun and all of that, but your goal as a speaker is to make sure that whatever you're telling them, like, they're engaging with the topic, not anything else, right? So I'll go back to the previous answer which I gave, which is in terms of asking questions to the audience, right? So as you're talking, you have to kind of like keep checking the audience in terms of like asking questions about what you just spoke. I know this kind of sounds contrary in some cases because essentially you expect the audience to ask you questions and not the other way around. But if you do that, it kind of keeps them engaged in one way. And another thing that I see that some speakers don't do is actually, or kind of what they do is they actually stand on stage like in a single location, like in a single place.
yeah,
If you do that, like everybody is like no movement is happening for the audience. But at least if you kind of walk across the stage as you're talking, at least they are engaging in terms of like looking at you and like trying to follow you, so there is some activity that is happening from their side which kind of keeps them a little bit alert. But more importantly, no matter how sleepy you are, one thing that will always engage the audience is storytelling. Now, I'm not talking about like film stories and all of that, but essentially formatting your talk in a way where it's kind of like a story, right? Now, this might not be possible with all of the talks that you do, but almost every talk you can actually do it. For example, if you're talking about a very like just a service, you're just talking about like an AWS service, right? So how do you build a story around an AWS service? One thing you could do is you could actually talk about the history of how that service came to be, For example, you could say that, the first service when it was released, these were the challenges with those services. A lot of people had issues when they were doing XYZ. So when AWS released the next version of that service, these features were added, and then this happened. So you're already building a storyline there when it's essentially a technical topic, right? So those are some things you could do. I mean, there's a lot more things, but I hope that, at least those two or three
Makes
pointers
sense.
can be
Makes
helpful.
sense. Yeah, storytelling always works. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We've all been grown up by listening to stories, so we connect well, and then there is in a story there is a beginning, there is a middle, and there is an end. So obviously we are looking up to that end, so that engages people.
One
Absolutely
thing
agree to that.
I'd just like to add here is that while we're talking about the challenge of keeping the audience engaged, what happens is sometimes the way you present something, you might actually disengage an engaged audience. So that's something that you should be, kind of uh, concentrating on. Like, be wary about it, because if you have a topic, and instead of kind of being very specific about that one or two kind of topics that you're talking about, if you kind of keep going into multiple other things, you kind of disengage them from your talk, right? So
Mm-hmm.
sticking to your original topic and staying true to that one or two core ideas that you're talking about will actually
Yeah,
just keep your audience engaged as well. Like, if you talk about 10 different technologies, it'll completely disengage them.
I agree. What on the same line, what could be other example of somebody actively disengaging people? Like you one mentioned, like using and talking about multiple technologies or taking multiple tangent. What else could be that disengagement?
Well, that's an interesting question. Can I put that back to you? Like, have you seen something that has been disengaging for you?
Yeah, disengagement. Sometimes it could be in terms of things like, hey, your audio is not working, or or your demo failed, or you were trying to do something and it didn't work out on the live audience, and then people get disengaged. Hey, this person doesn't know what he is talking about. He was saying this XYZ would happen, but it didn't happen. So that sometimes I have seen that disengages people.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, in fact, I'd like to take that same example. In the recent talk, that the Dev Day, there were some mic issues, I would say, in terms of the audio. So, you're trying to listen to the speaker, but then this audio thing is happening in the background, where you're either like speaking directly into the mic, or like
Yeah.
something like that, and that kind of is disturbing, and it disengages the audience. But I think primarily what would disengage most audience is the fact that you're not getting to the point,
Yeah.
right? um, this actually goes back to a point that I wanted to make before, is when you start your talk, you have to define your agenda very clearly as to what is it that you're going to talk about, and what are the challenges that you had while you were talking about that topic, and how are you going to solve that, right? And you always have to keep hitting those points and keep the audience engaged there. If you keep going on tangent and not come to the point, and you keep talking about things that are, not really to the core, you'll definitely disengage an audience.
A good point. I agree on that. Now, as we are seeing that lot of talks is going on inclusion side of the presentation. So I want to address this question that sometimes we are little biased. Like if I give my example, I've been into training field in Middle East for a long time, and most of the time my audience was male candidate. So any example I was taking was related to, hey, this is XYZ, he is doing this, he did that, he has used this. So I was always using the male dominated examples. But when I moved to Europe, things were different. I could get most of the time lot of male female audience in my training. So how we can consciously be inclusive while presenting?
Right. One thing that I have heard quite often, that as Indians, as we make a mistake, is that we often use the word guys. So, guys, how is it going? Or like, guys, are you understanding? I know it's not that you're purposefully being trying to be selective, but you have to understand that the things are different today, right? So you have to be careful about the kind of wordings that you use in order to be inclusive. Now, this is This is something like the answer to this is not specifically, you know, related to talks itself. This is something that you would have to generally do in your life, which is when you use words, try to use the inclusive words where, for example, when you talk about something, especially yourself, that you do, like rather than saying that I did this, I had to do that, you could kind of use the word we, right? So that kind of sometimes includes the audience as well. So when you say what we need to do is go click here, right? So when you do that, you are also telling the audience that you are included in what I'm doing, right? Rather than saying what I would do is I would click here, then I would do this. So small words like that, um, I would kind of say that much. There's the concept of inclusivity is actually much further than just your talks, right? It's something that you have to do every day and keep practicing.
Yeah. You can't turn a switch on and be inclusive and then be off from it. Yeah, it has to be
Absolutely.
consciously engaged in that. Great, makes sense. Now, I want to move on to the next question. What we are trying to see here is like how I would be gaining opportunities to speak, ways to gain experience as a speaker. The one example you gave is a user group. What can be some other ways where we could try to be showcase ourselves like, hey, I'm a speaker or I'm at least interested in speaking?
Right. So one thing I'd probably go back to the first point that I was making is that the whole goal of all of this, whether you're speaking at a public session or whether you're speaking at a meeting, I know it might sound contrarian to a lot of the audience, but essentially you're not running around to be a speaker. Like you're not wanting to be a speaker, you're wanting to share knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So that should be your primary goal. And when you do that, it's not just the talks that you do, it's maybe articles that you're posting on, Medium or on LinkedIn. The things that you write up, um, kind of build towards that concept of being a speaker, right? You be a speaker when you're actually good at the topic that you're going to talk about. One thing that I would definitely ask people to avoid in terms of like when you're thinking about speaking is just learning a topic and then going and speaking. That doesn't help, right? So what you want to do is you want to start building a very niche um, expertise in certain areas. So if you are a Kubernetes expert, write articles about it, write posts about it, and be gain that expertise in certain areas and post in these different communities. There is another program called the AWS Community Builders program, which is like there is like for every quarter there is one batch that gets as part of the community builders program. So if you're part of that, you kind of get to share the posts that you're writing. You also get some speaking opportunities there, where there are other user groups that are wanting speakers. So you can kind of get those opportunities, but in order to get those, you should already build up an expertise, right? um, and it's very important that you do that, and you're not just someone who's just, there is an opportunity there, let me apply and let me just learn this topic and then go speak there. You will not, essentially that will not work out. I mean, you might do this talk, but that will not really work out for your future. You want to build those expertise, and like you've already mentioned, the user groups are there. Then there are community builder program for AWS, and of course a lot of other communities. You don't have to be like, I know I'm talking a lot about AWS, so you don't have to be like AWS specific as well. There are like Kubernetes communities. There are other kind of open cloud communities as well. There is a community called CNCF, which you can be part of, and there are a lot of opportunities for you to talk over there as well, right?
Makes sense. Now, on this same line of trying to find engagement or opportunities for engagement, another thing comes is the topic selection. So I may think this is very cool, but what could be a checklist I could follow to say whether it is worth a public speaking engagement or not? Maybe for me, getting a SMS from SNS service initially was very cool, but it is not something I would like to present into a public session. So what could be a checklist I could mentally follow for topic selection?
Right. So this kind of falls back to the previous point that I was making in terms of like when you start building expertise in certain areas, um, you will kind of figure that out yourself. But if you're someone new to the like getting expertise, and you're not sure about what kind of topics that you want to talk about, the couple of things that I would probably say is you don't want to talk about just how a service works, right? That's one thing that a lot of CFPs that I've seen, like they want to talk about how, like you said, how SNS works, right? Nobody wants to know that. You want to probably explain a use case that comes from using a service. So don't just talk about how something works. You definitely want to take a use case of how that service fits into the talk, right? So those kind of topics. um there was something else that I wanted to say, but I kind of forgot about that. But essentially, what you want to do is you definitely want to first of all have expertise in certain areas. Like you don't want to have the shotgun approach, which is like shoot and like hope that one of those pellets hit one topic that you want to talk about. If you have expertise in certain areas, then I think it'll kind of automatically become clear to you. But like I said, don't talk about like just how something works. A use case based topic will actually help out much better.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Now, we want to talk a little bit as the topic thing is coming up. Like what could be mechanism and tool to use in addition to verbal presentation, or slide deck, or something?
Okay, this is something I'll have to think about. um, so the question is about other than your slides, like
Yeah,
what
me
would you do?
slide. I would always expect when I'm going into a presentation that there would be a slide deck, right? What else could be done? Like some people do quizzes, some people, like you said, activity
Mhm.
has stand up and do X, Y, Z or something. Any other thing which you have seen or which you could recommend?
Yeah. So if possible, have a session where you have 90% of your time spent on doing a demo rather than actually just having a presentation, right?
Hmm.
So demos definitely help. And of course, having like you said, the quizzes that are there nowadays, you can't, like you don't do that in between sessions. You have that at the end of the session kind of a thing, so that people can stay engaged. But for any tech talk specifically, you will get almost everyone engaged if you're kind of going to do a demo of what you want to show, or what you're
Hmm.
talking about, the topic basically.
Yeah, makes sense. And on the same side, when you are presenting, there are some logistics things to check, right? There will always be a challenge, and this challenge becomes more prominent into virtual engagement. Your microphone not working, or audio not as expected, or camera lighting. So, what could be some of the tips you could share here?
Well, most of this will depend on obviously the kind of talk that you're doing. Like if you're doing like a virtual talk, this thing actually matters a lot more. But normally when you're doing like a session at a stage, most of these things are actually taken care by the team. But essentially, even in those cases, what you definitely want to do is go to the venue beforehand, like before, like half an hour before the entire program starts, and actually plug your computer in or whichever item you're using to present, and make sure everything is working, right? But as far as online is concerned, you definitely want to come like 10 minutes before your session. And if you're using something like StreamYard or something like that, you want to definitely check out your audio and all of that. Was that the question?
Yeah, that's the one. Like, what could be the common checks I should be doing? So, yeah, audio checks and then showing up early at the venue if it is a physical event. Makes
Yeah,
sense.
one thing you definitely want to do is, as far as the slides are concerned, you definitely want to have backup options for your slides. So once you're done preparing your slides, I would definitely say email it yourself. All right. As well as if you're doing it on a stage, have a backup copy sent to the audio video guys. So what happens is normally they have like two options. One is you can either present from your own device, and if there's any issues with that, they can actually play it from their device which is connected to the monitors, right? And
Yeah.
you can kind of control that. So slides, having that saved somewhere else is very important. You don't want to like spend 1 week creating slides, and then when you're time for presenting, like it's either
Yeah,
corrupt or something like that, right?
I agree on that. Agree on that. Now, going on the dynamics of virtual and physical or in-person event. So if I presented a deck on the in-person event, can I use this as it is into virtual event, or do I need to do some modification, and vice versa? Would your style change? Would your slide deck change? Would your delivery change based on in-person versus virtual?
Yeah, so there is some differences, and there are some key differences. Is the first thing is obviously when you're doing an in-person event, you are looking people in the face, and you can kind of read what's going on. You can definitely see a lot of people yawning many times, but I think it's an advantage that
Yes.
you don't get to see that when you're doing a virtual event,
I
right?
get it.
But at the same time, the issue with virtual in that sense is that you don't get to know what the audience is feeling like. You don't know whether they're yawning or whether they are happy or whether they are clapping, right? So that is one of the main difference in terms of like audience engagement, which basically means now you have to do something extra when it comes to a virtual event to ensure that the audience is engaged, right? If you're in person, you can see what's going on, you can kind of do something like I talked before, which is ask questions and things like that, engage with the audience. When it comes to virtual, you might have to do some additional things like maybe some quizzes on screen, or you want to stop. This is something that I do regardless of whether it is a virtual or a in-person event. Is while you're talking, like don't wait till the end to ask if there are any questions for the audience. Like in between your talk, like take like 30-second breaks and ask if there are any questions, right? So that will also increase your engagement levels. um what's different, what else is different? um with a virtual event, you obviously get a lot more reach than you would normally get with like an in-person event, because obviously with in-person, like someone has to turn up and someone has to show up. So you would normally get like numbers between like 50 or 500, like I said. But if you have like a good social media presence, then a virtual event can bring in thousands of people, right? So there's that difference.
Makes sense. Completely makes sense. Now, obviously, mistakes are part of whatever we do. When probably there would be some moment like something maybe logistic didn't work out or demo didn't work out or maybe something happened. So how to still maintain your cool and calm when you made a mistake, either online or in person meeting, which happens.
Definitely happens, and it has happened to me. And I want everyone to know that every one of you who's listening to this, you will fail at some point, and being prepared for that is absolutely essential. Now if you want to see like somewhere where I have failed miserably, you can actually go look at the video for when was that? I think that was 2021. Yeah, 2021. We did like a online community day. Essentially what happened there was that someone else was controlling the online thing, so I didn't know when the camera was on. So I was like
Hmm.
startled a bit, like, and I couldn't start off, and there was a bit of fumble there, right? So realizing obviously that there will always be mistakes that will happen, but one of the reasons that people often end up making mistakes is if you're not a very experienced speaker, sometimes having notes will definitely help you, right? In terms of like what are the points that you need to talk about. If you're a very experienced speaker, sometimes you just need to have bullet points and you would know what the topic is
Yeah.
and you would know what to talk about. But if you're new to this, make sure that that bullet points is a little bit more longer, like you have like couple of sentences so that you can quickly refer to where you are and what you need to speak about. because there are scenarios where you'll definitely fumble and you'll be lost, like you wouldn't know like what should I talk about next, or whatever you thought that you were going to talk about is now not coming to you, so you can refer back to your notes and kind of get back to that position.
Makes sense. Now, when you are on stage, your body language is obviously is another thing which people are watching. This not just presentation, it is also you who is in spotlight. So, what could be your tips for some body language specific things?
So this is something like everything that I've been talking about, like speaking opportunities and things like that, right? So this is something that has to happen outside of your talking environment. Like you said before, when it comes to inclusivity, you don't like switch on and switch off, right? The same
Yeah,
thing happens here. Like the body language is something that you have to develop over time, and it's not something that you just do for a talk and you don't do outside. um, One of the things that I mentioned before is obviously in terms of your stage presence, making sure that you actually move around a little bit and you're not like standing in one place and you're kind of like you're like already tired and you're like standing there, and like nobody wants to see that, right? So that's one thing that you want to avoid. And obviously being expressive with your hands, this is something that I actually tell everyone to do. So for example, when you talk about issues, problems that you faced, and you want to actually express that when you actually speak. So let's say that you're working with something and you got like really frustrated, like you want to kind of express that, like I tried to make this work and it couldn't, like no matter what I did it didn't work. So being expressive with your hands will also kind of be helpful. And of course, not just when you're angry, when not just when you're talking about something that you got angry at, but when you're talking about something that you're happy about, right?
yeah.
So this is one thing that you can actually do on stage. So when you, if you're doing a demo for example, right, and something works, you can go like yes it worked, right? So you can kind of be expressive in that way, and it'll actually be a little good for the audience to stay engaged.
That's a great thing. Now, I would, in the interest of time, I would pick up some question from the audience. And audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to share them on the chat, and I'll highlight it here. Now, this is an observation from Bhavesh, and it's in the form of a question. You speak very fluently and calmly. I would agree to that. And with ums or with no ums and ers, how you manage to do that? What practice you do to maintain this on a daily basis? And can you recommend something to get going? English may not be our first language, and that is where you have used a lot of filler words, which sometimes become distracting. So, how to overcome that?
Okay. um as far as how I have been able to achieve it is not something um that I did overnight or I did in a few weeks or something like that. This is something that's been happening ever since I've been growing up. So whether it's in school or whether it's anywhere else, your environment really matters. So if you have friends who are always talking in a local language and you're not necessarily talking in English, then obviously it's not going to be as easy for you to adopt English, specifically if you're talking about like talking in English. But more importantly, what I have noticed is that the challenge here is not language, right? The challenge is your flow of thought, right?
Flow of thoughts, yeah.
Your yeah, how you're trying to put across a point. So it's not necessarily that you might be not good at English. Even people who have broken English are able to sometimes talk, talk through fluently without having a lot of filler words and things like that in your conversation. So I would say is, if you're very new to speaking, go to that concept where I talked about, like have points written down. So have bullet points and
Hmm.
then just start talking on those points, right? If
Yeah,
you're not comfortable just like having one point, then have a longer sentence and that would kind of help you out.
makes
And
sense.
if you're specifically talking about English, then I grew up watching English movies a lot, so I think maybe that has to do something with it. But there is a little bit of history with my side, is that I used to be an accent coach, so maybe that helps, I don't
We
know.
need that. We need that. Makes sense. Makes sense. And now, talking from your experience, and we want to learn from that. Sorry, let me remove that one. I'm bringing up another question which I had planned to ask. Give me a minute. Ways to gain. Give me a minute.
Sure, sure.
I'm interested in listening to what is your best and worst kind of experiences, or any presentation which you feel, hey, I did the best, or anything which didn't work out as expected. So what was the reason on to that manner? Like what can be uh, your good presentation and bad presentation, and why you think that was good and why you think that was bad? Your experience.
Well, I would like to say I've never had a bad talk, but then I would be lying. Um, so I've not had bad experience per se, right? I, if I'm specifically talking about the talks that I have done, I've not necessarily had like a bad experience per se, but I've seen some talks that have been like excruciating to sit through. I'd probably want to say, in the sense, like those bad experiences is sometimes, I think I mentioned this before, which is talking too many topics instead of like sticking to the core topic. That will definitely be an issue in your talks. And not being fully prepared is definitely a big issue. um as I was preparing for this, I did ask myself a question yesterday, is that, you know are you going to talk about how to prepare for a talk without preparing for the talk, right? So
Like it.
so
Like
so
it.
yeah, as you get experience with this, sometimes you might make the mistake thinking that you're really good at this and you can pull it off. But very essential that you always stay prepared, at least with some basic pointers to talk about. um, in terms of talking about good talks is essentially where the audience claps at the end and they ask you questions. That's basically it, right? If the audience is asking you questions, it's a really good talk. If the audience is not asking you questions, then yeah, you might have to work a little bit on that. A good talk is not necessarily something where something fantastic is going to happen. If something doesn't go wrong, it's a good talk.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Now, it is more like a observation from Parul. It helps a lot watching talk shows and English movies, but most important is the thought process. Yeah, I agree on that exactly. And do you sometime when you are doing it for, let's say, a very uh, bigger stages like reinvent or reinforce, do you record yourself while like while you are preparing for it? Do you record yourself?
Yeah, so this is one of the points that I wanted to make, is that when you actually go to do these talks, make sure that this is not the first time you're talking about this topic. Um,
Exactly.
if you like this actually goes back to another question that a lot of people ask, is can I reuse my talks? And I would say absolutely 100%, as many times as you can. Because when you do that, what happens is you actually get a lot of questions from the audience, and you are able to like enhance that talk every time, every single time you do it, right? So if you have the opportunity, like
Sorry.
before you go to like a larger stage, if you do have the opportunity to have the stock at other places, make sure you do that first, so that you get more comfortable with the topic and you actually can expect or anticipate the questions that the audience would have, and you can actually express, talk about it a little bit better. If that doesn't happen, like you don't have an option there, then the bare minimum is, in terms of time management, uh, if you don't do a run through of your talk before you do the talk, you wouldn't know how long it's going to take. You would actually definitely overrun your time, because you always think, even for a 45-minute talk, and no matter how many times I do this, I'm always just astounded and amazed by how in the world that 45 minutes just ran away, right? So it is very essential that you do a dry runs as much as possible before. So whether that involves you recording yourself, or whether that involves just you talking through the slides by just looking at the slides. Do anything that you can in order to like get comfortable with it and make sure that you're hitting those timelines that you're supposed to have. So for example, if you have like a talk and then the demo, and if you want to make sure that by slide 3 you're like 10 minutes into the slide, and by maybe slide 6 you're like 15 minutes into the slide, so have those markers and it'll help you. But I will always again say, make sure that you have the option of talking about that topic at other places before you go talk at a larger event.
Makes sense. Good advice. Now, I would like to ask one last question here, and let me quickly check if there is something on the audience. Uh, Time management is a key, obviously, and let's consider a situation you practice well. Due to whatever reason, you are not able to finish within the time given. What you would do? You would cut it abruptly, or you would run through the all slide but in a faster manner. What would Faisal do in that case?
It happens all the time. So so first of all, like if you're doing like larger events, then you obviously would have a timer in front of you, the monitor in front of you, so you would know how much time is left. So it wouldn't be like you're suddenly at the end someone is telling you time is up. You would definitely know, how the time is running. So um, you have to have, you have mentally, you need to know in your presentations what are the core areas that you have to cover, right? There are obviously going to be other slides which are additional information, but there are obviously going to be like core ideas which if you don't talk about, like the talk is pointless, right? So as you're looking at the time, if you see that you're kind of running away with the time, what you need to do is obviously remove those unnecessary, like you can just go through those other slides and just say that this is additional information. I can talk about this outside. If you'd like to meet me to talk about this outside, I can talk about it. So try to get to those important topics, right? But at the very end, if your like time is over absolutely and you have no more time to talk about, then what you can just say is ended by saying that I have a lot more to share here. I would definitely love to talk about this more with you. If you want to discuss this more, I'll be outside. We can take this forward.
Makes sense. So that was Faisal, and he has shared lots of good tips. And probably once you start working on it, it would obviously help. And presentation is part and parcel of corporate life. It could be internal, it could be external. If you get external engagement good enough, you get more fame and famous being famous. But yeah, that comes with a lot of responsibilities too, because you would be on YouTube for years and years to come. Even your kids would be watching. You made a mistake, so make sure that you properly do it and then only upload it. So practice is the best thing. Thanks, Faisal. Thank you for being here and sharing the tips. Now, one question on the user group side, I was scrolling through question, how somebody could join a user group.
Yeah. So there are different user groups have like different URLs, but the best place to go, I would say, is meetup.com, right? Over there, if
Meetup.com. Okay.
you, yeah, if you just go there and search for AWS user group and then your city name, for example, you can just search AWS user group Hyderabad, and then you would have the city name show up there, right? So that would be the place. But if you're talking specifically about Hyderabad user group, you can just go to awsughyd.com. So that's where you can join in.
Makes sense. Thank you so much. Thank you. And we would now wrap it up. The session would be continuing after a 5 minute break. So I'll add 5 minutes the timer here. Thank you, Faisal. It was enlightening. We learned a lot. Anything last thing you want to say or share?
Yeah, I would just like to thank you, Ashish, for having me here. I know
Hey,
this is a very open topic. There is absolutely so much more to talk about this. There are some points that I wanted to talk about, but kind of missed out. But I would definitely love to talk about it with anyone else that would like to discuss this more. All right, and thank you
makes
so much
sense.
for having me.
It was nice. Thanks for your time. So that was Faisal. You heard firsthand about how to deliver a great presentation. And now we will take a short 5 minute break, and then we will come back with the next topic with Prasad, which will be on whether an individual contributor or a manager. So enjoy your 5 minute break. We'll talk again soon. Thank you. All right. I hope everyone is back. And now let me add Prasad to stream. Good morning, Prasad.
Morning, Ashish. Hello, everyone. Great session by Faizal.
Nice.
Loved it. Absolutely
Exactly.
loved
I
the
mean,
tips
there
that
are
he
like
shared.
practical tips you could use from next day, and you would be successful. I agree on that. So I'll let you get started. I'll remove myself from stage, but I'm here at the back end monitoring chat. If any question comes up, I would surely send it across you. Right. Thank you.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much. Cool, folks. Let's talk about how to make a career decision, whether to be a manager or to be an IC. So, whoever is there, let us know in chat whether you are currently an IC or a manager or in a hybrid role. And while you're telling that, also tell what you like about being if you're on IC, you love it, or if you're waiting to become a manager, or if you recently became a manager and what's your experience is, or if you're in a hybrid role that you're getting the best of both worlds. Just like if you would like to start uh, typing it in the chat, that will be good, so that I'll be able to understand what the audience is, and then accordingly we'll be able to see. So turn to IC. Oh, okay. Wow. That's an interesting experience. Anthony's IC, Arones, IC aspiring to be a manager. Great. Nivedita, IC and absolutely love it. Good. Emma is hybrid role. Awesome. So Devesh is again okay, having a couple of reportees. It's kind of a bit of a hybrid role, but still from a full-fledged manager to IC and then a hybrid role. Would love to hear your experience. Raghavendra is manager. Daniel is IC. Michael is aspiring IC role. Yeah, we'll talk about that. IC has less responsibility. Purnima is in hybrid. Awesome. Cool. So let's get started. Right? Mohammed, Mohammed is in manager role. Good. I love the mix that we have. So we'll be able to probably talk about pros and cons and all of it between it. So I'll start with a quote of Steve Jobs that like what he actually mentions is quite great, that obviously we'll be like spending most of our life working, right? So the only way we'll be truly satisfied is that what we believe is great work, and the only way to do great work is to love what you do. And that's actually very important. This quote from Steve emphasizes that choosing a fulfilling career path that you love is critical to professional and personal satisfaction. So your work actually, like shapes your daily life. So it's important that you enjoy the core day-to-day activities, not just the end results. So we have different kinds of perks, like being a manager and an IC. So you should be able to, like enjoy it doing them on a daily basis. And we'll talk about it in more detail. Find the work that overlaps with your natural strengths and interests, because you're going to do it for a long time. So be intentional about choosing your work and find meaningful and engagement. Take the time to identify the work you believe is great based on your values and passions. And this self-restriction would, tremendously pay off in the long term. So how to find actually what you love? Whether you would love to work as a manager or whether you would to love continue working as an IC, how are you going to find that? So let's look into what steps we can take. First, obviously, we can understand the expectations, roles, and responsibilities of each role and see what resonates with you specifically more. We can learn from other people experiences, and I'll talk about my experience also about learning from other people experiences, and I'll show a few other people experiences that might help you to like understand that what other people have been through when they have been in a manager role or an IC role. Get clarity on the career ladder in your organization, right, that you're working, or it might be in the potential organization that you're thinking about going. So whenever you are, like thinking about switching a job or growing in your like current organization, be mindful not only about just the day-to-day work or the compensation part of it, but also the career ladder and the growth part of it. And then finally, if it's possible to try both roles and decide, that will be awesome. Like you're not able to decide by just understanding the roles or by just hearing to other people experiences, then you can always go and try both roles and see what works best for you. So let's go through, dive deep into each of these 4 points, right? And this is where I'd say, like the road to success is always under construction. So if I talk about myself, at the current career stage I am in, I'm happy to be an IC and I want to continue growing as an IC. That doesn't mean that it might not change. It might not change. Probably a few years down the line, I might think that no, it's enough of IC. I might think about going for management. Or probably you are a manager, like you have been an IC, then you become a manager, and then you realized that you might want to switch back to an IC. And that is fine. It's always under construction. At any moment you can always evaluate what you're enjoying in that current phase in the life, and then accordingly, like choose. So there is no harm in being back and forth. I know few people in Amazon who have done at least 2 or 3 times. Like they have been in Amazon for 10 years now, more than 10 years, like more than a decade or so. And they have been back and forth between manager and IC multiple times, because at different times they wanted different things. So it's always, like it's not an end state. That's what I'm trying to say. It's always a continuous journey. Now let's start with roles and responsibilities of a manager versus IC. As a manager, you set strategic vision and direction for the team. And as an individual contributor, you provide strategic guidance and direction within the domain area. Now, while we are going through each and roles and responsibilities, let's try and understand what exactly it means and try and self-reflect what you would enjoy more. So if I'm a manager, I would have to think about the entire team as a whole. And if we take off a normal, simple team, which is, let's say, developing a feature or delivering some project to a client, and that team might be having your business analysts, your developers, your, probably QA, your DevOps, there might be multiple people comprising in the team. And you need to set the vision and the direction of the entire team to achieve one goal. You would enjoy that, or compared to if you're going into technical expertise, you might be setting the technical or the strategic direction for your domain area. And that might be as simple as, let's say, if your whole, tech stack is built on the mean. So you're going to provide strategic guidance in that area, or you might be a QA leader and you're thinking about strategic guidance of that particular domain area. And I'm talking about at the junior level. If you come more, at the higher level, in a manager level, you might be thinking about your entire org, and at a technical level, you might be thinking about the strategic direction of your entire, a company. So think about what you would be enjoying more. In terms of the decisions that you make, right? As a manager, you think more about the resource allocation, the staffing, and the budgets and the timelines, the delivery, those kinds of decisions. But as a technical, you'll be doing more technical decisions. What tech stack would be the right thing? What kind of architecture we should be using? What kind of technical expertise that the teams will need to build. So accordingly, though hiring might be done by the manager, but you might be having inputs in the kind of team that needs to be assembled to make this project successful. In terms of communication, as a manager, you'll be communicating with influence, and influencing the executives and stakeholders. It will be one of the primary responsibilities to ensure that everyone is on the same page, whether it is your team members or stakeholders outside your team members. And as an IC, you might be still, you would be still communicating. It's not that you'll be working in a silo, but you would be communicating with the executives more from the technical perspective. In terms of accountability, you would be like, as a manager, you'll be accountable for the team performance. But as a technical person, you would be accountable for more delivering the complex components. Now, this is where, what energizes you more, whether it is about, like orchestrating the team to achieve a specific goal, or it's about, like taking up complex or a challenging issue and then driving it towards success. What is going to be more, uh, fulfilling for you? And accordingly, you can think about what you should be, like choosing. And in terms of the, culture and the environment, manager has a responsibility to ensure that it's a conducive environment for everyone to thrive. And in terms of a technical person or a IC, it's about choosing the right kind of, or making the right kind of decisions for the technologies and ensuring that the latest, we are actually on top of the trends that are going through in the industry. So manager needs to ensure that the team is encouraged so that they can do those experimentation. And as an IC, you need to ensure that you're doing those kinds of experimentation with the new technologies. So these are the high level roles and responsibilities. Now let's talk about the perks. Right? Being a manager has some perks, being an IC has some perks, right? So if we talk about what will be the perks of each of it. As a manager, you have a greater influence not only in your team, but on the wider org. But as an IC, you get to develop your specialized skills. As a manager, you have more opportunities for leadership development. Or as an IC, you have more focused accountability. Now, it's up to you what you love to do more in your day-to-day life. As a manager, you have more promotion opportunities, and this is something that I have experienced, that when you grow up the ladder, probably at a junior level, it's equivalent for both. But when you grow up the ladder as a manager, you will have more opportunities to move into leadership positions. There are for individual contributors, but it is, I would say, more difficult. And probably in few companies, they do not even have a defined career path. But what you will have is that autonomy to gain your technical mastery. And if that is what something energizes you, and that is what you're interested in, then IC is a more suitable role. In terms of compensation also, I've seen the role of manager is much more, I would say, responsibility based. You are not only responsible for what you are doing, but also what your entire team is doing. So there are places where you will be getting a higher pay and equity. On the other side, as an IC, you have individual creativity. You can work on the things that you would like to. You will get other kinds of perks. For example, if you would love to do public speaking, then you will have that autonomy to go and do that. And now you all have all the tips also from Faizal, how to do be a great public speaker, right? So but being a manager, you need to think about what team needs to do. So even if you might want to have some specific thing you want to work on, but if it does not align with your team, then you might have to prioritize what team would like to do. But as an individual contributor, obviously you will be prioritizing what team needs to do, but you will have space for your individual creativity. In terms of impact, the manager has a broader impact, not only on the team but the overall org, because you're responsible for a lot many things. But as an IC, you can have a better work-life balance, and we'll talk about it a bit more. Uh, in the next slide, I'm going to debunk all those the perks that I'm talking here with the myths. As a manager, it's very important for you to building relationship. Even as an IC, it is important, but as a manager, it is something that you cannot work without. You need to ensure the cross org functionalities that you're working on. So you need to have good relationships with everyone within the team and outside the team. As an IC, you will get involved in less politics. You can, offload that kind of I generally offload that kind of things to my manager. If there is some uh, a specific team that I would like to work with, and that team might not be aligned with my goals or with our goals, I might ask my manager to go and deal and get the team aligned, and I'll get involved when that team gets aligned. So those kinds of stuff is possible when you're an IC. And then one thing, and this is really important, what you would love to be. You do you love to be recognized for the team success, or do you love to be recognized for individual achievements? That's one thing that is going to define your own mindset, your own individual versus team's success criterias. And so think about this. Let's say you're you're watching a football match, right? One person is standing on the sideline, the team manager or the coach, and is helping team score goals. And the person is becoming happy when the team scores the goal, though he's not in the field. That's the manager. And then there'll be persons in the front line who are actually scoring goals, and those will be ICs. Think about what actually motivates you, and accordingly you can think that which role is better fit for you. Now, talking about the myths. Now, you might find some things contradictory from what we have seen in the last slide in this. We'll talk about it. So as a manager, you might think that it's easier because you delegate all the work. Especially, when I was a junior IC, when I started my career, I used to think that it's good that as soon as I'll become a manager, I will be able to dump all my work to others, and it'll be easy peasy for me. That's never the case. The more you become higher, and once you become a manager, you start feeling the pressure, and it's always easy to be in control of the work that you do rather than in being control of the work that other people's do. So it never becomes easy when you delegate the work. And as an IC, you feel that you know uh, doing that same tactical task forever. I used to think that that being an IC, if I don't move to manager, I'll not be having growth opportunities. I'll keep doing the same coding stuff forever, and that's not the case. When you grow up as an IC, you elevate a lot. Probably point for another session that how to grow as an IC and how your roles and responsibilities change. But you're not going to be doing the same tactical stuff that you have been doing as an IC. There's a lot of room to grow there. As a manager, you might feel that you have better job security once you move up. No. And recently, what has happened in the tech industry with all the reduction in roles in almost most companies, we have seen that irrespective whether an IC or manager, the job security, it's only your skills, whether it's as an IC or as a manager, that is going to help you with job security. When I say job security, not in the current company, but in case even if reduction happens with no fault of yours, you will be able to quickly get another job. So keep honing the skills that you have, whether as an IC or in manager. I would say it's always risky being in tech industry. So be prepared. So always be on top of your game. As I said, it's not that as an IC there is no room for growth and career development. There is plenty. There is plenty. As a manager, you might feel that you don't need technical skills anymore. That's not the case. You would need the technical skills. And we'll talk about it in more detail towards the end of the session. That to be a great manager, you need to be a great individual contributor, and that's how you can become a great manager. And as a IC, you might feel that like you lack the larger business impact. That's not the case. When you are starting in your career, you might feel that, and that might be true because you are more focused only on your technical stuff that has been given to you. But you can always flip the coin. Like start understanding what the business reasons are because of which a specific task has been given to you as a junior IC. But as you start growing as an in your IC career, it'll automatically come that like none of the technical decisions are made unless there is a business impact. And every technical decision that you will make, or every task that you are doing, that has a larger business impact. All the companies are built on the technical foundations. As a manager, you might feel it's a straight path to senior leadership roles. It's not the case. Obviously, if you're good, there is a path. It's an easier path than a technical to get into leadership roles, but you need to be good at it, right? You will see that a lot of ICs who are really good, when they become a manager, they struggle because they might not be born a leader, right? So it's something that they need to learn along the way. And as a IC, you might feel that you're working in a solo with no visibility to leadership. I used to think that, but that's not the case. Somehow I got to know early in my career that there was a small feature that I was implementing, and I was like, okay, this is done. But when the feature got released, the leadership actually came to my desk. There were two folks who came to my desk and specifically thanked me for getting that feature. So obviously, it is your manager's job also to ensure that you have that kind of visibility into the leadership. But leadership is also always looking into like all the tasks that team is doing, right? So you do have visibility to leadership, and you do have a lot of room to grow into leadership. Yeah, it's like a lot of people think that like moving to manager gets a better pay. Yes, you get a better pay, but it's not that that's the only way to get rich. It's a short way to get rich. Definitely, it opens up most door. So there's always a trade-off. And as an IC, we talked about IC will be having more work-life balance. It's not always the case. It obviously you'll have time to choose what work you would like to work, what tasks you would like to work on. You'll have more creativity, and you like independence and autonomy. But if you're growing up your career ladder, then very soon you will see that you are involved in too many things, and work life balance is something that you will have to be conscious about so that you can have it better. So the reality for both roles is that each role has its own unique demands and challenges. It's they're not the same roles. A lot of people think that like management is becoming like the next role is management, so it's a natural progression. No, each role is different, and it has unique demands and challenges. Both roles requires continuous learning and skill development, different kinds, but it requires. Both needs soft and technical skills. Manager do need technical skills, ICs do need soft skills so that you can grow up in your ladder. There are opportunities to gain influence and make impact, especially when you are like, and we'll talk about the career ladders, how the paths look like, and at what stage you would be like having that impact on the larger org. And yes, you need to be proactive, you need to have bias for action, you need to take ownership in both roles. It's not something that only managers needs to do it or IC needs to do. Both needs to have those kinds of traits in them to grow in their career. So generally what I say is that management is not a promotion, it's a lateral move, it's a change of profession. Though in few companies the natural progression is that after this particular role you become a manager, but it's a totally different skill set that you do gain with that. So, and it's all about what you enjoy, right? Let me remove my how do I do that? Yes. So managers are motivated by enabling teams to collaborate smoothly and deliver results. So if that is something that motivates you, go ahead into the management path. But if it not, then think about it, that why you're thinking of becoming a manager, or how you can like build those skills and start enjoying those things. And ICs are driven by leveraging their expertise to build excellent products and systems. So it depends upon what you like to do on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so now learn from other people experiences. So let's do one thing. Yeah, let me look into, because we are now moving to the second section of how you can look. The first was understanding the roles and responsibilities, the perks and the myths. Let me look into the questions to see if we have any questions on that. Raghavendra says your role does not define your capabilities and it doesn't stop you from learning new things. Absolutely correct. It's the part of the identity. And being a manager but by occupying this role, you can still learn and grow as an individual contributor. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the hybrid roles, that how you can be both manager and IC, but at some point you need to make the decision, which, because it requires separate skills. So when you start moving to leadership positions, you will have to choose either this or that, unfortunately, but yes. I'll try and I'll read the comments, but I'll try and focus on the questions if we have any. It is more about time management and what roles entails you in your organization. Managers are bombarded with silly meetings which are actually not required, and lose time and tech skills gradually. Yes, that is there. And that's why if you still if you want to be a manager, then you need to optimize those things, how you can reduce those meetings, how you can optimize, and how you can ensure that everyone in the team is focused on the things that are actually required. Parul says, glad I joined the session. Thank you, Parul. Appreciate it. Example of football. Yeah. Zidane versus Ronaldo. Makes sense. Parul says, I see salaries are more than managers in most Indian companies. It's the other way around. Possible, if you're talking more about consulting. But if you look into the product companies, which India has a lot now, and even in like the startups, when you grow up the ladder in the leadership positions, it might be other way around. But yeah, it depends upon company to company, and obviously cultures to cultures. Emma says, after hearing insights, I'm more keen on becoming an IC now. Yeah. So it's about obviously way at every stage of your career, that what makes more sense for you. Cool. So let's start about listening to other people's experience, right? So if I move to next, and thanks Ashish for managing the screen views. I really appreciate it. So, okay, before going into this, so what I've tried to do is that from my own experience, I've collected few, voices from managers and from individual contributors. And I've put together 3 quotes from individuals who are managers or who have moved into management role, and who are similarly 3 quotes from IC. So when we'll go through those quotes, think about it, that someone who has been walked in those shoes are, are sharing their observations, are sharing their experiences. Is that going to help you make the decision, or is that going to give you enough insights that whether or not you want to be there sooner or later? So let's read through those quotes. The first is a manager voice, so someone who has moved into management role. It was an adjustment going from my individual contributor where I was an expert, where I was expert, to being a manager where I needed to rely on my team skill. I had to learn to delegate more and resist micromanaging. Now, when you're an individual contributor, especially if you're a good individual contributor, and you become a manager, you start having certain expectations that you want people to be doing that level of quality or deliver that level of like commitment into the work. And that might not be the case. Everyone has different kinds of skills and different kinds of strengths. So you need to ensure that how you can leverage those so that your team goal is met. And as I said, like most individual contributors, when they move into manager, they somehow become micromanagers. And as individual contributors, we do not like anyone micromanaging us. But when we become managers, we fall into the same trap, right? Because we are all humans. Like, you know, so everyone learns from their own, like kind of mistakes. So resist doing that. It's like not trust. You need to trust your team that they will be able to deliver the same level of quality. And that is something, if you feel that you will be able to do, then you might be a good fit for manager. But if you want to be on top of things at every detail, knowing, like probably minute by minute status, think again that whether or not manager is the right choice for you. As a manager, I gained a much broader perspective on organization industry. I enjoyed having a seat at the table for bigger decisions and steering the direction of my team. Now, this is really important thing. Now, as a manager, you have more responsibilities, and that responsibilities also means that you will have, if you can call it a privilege, of having a seat, and then you will be making those decisions about your team. Now, few people like being an IC might feel that it's too much meetings. We discuss a lot versus doing. If you are someone like that who feel that like I would like to avoid meetings, it's better that I work on like actual things and then steer the direction of the team instead of like getting into meetings and getting multiple stakeholders onto the same page. Then you're better IC suited. But if you like or enjoy having those difficult conversations with different peoples to ensure that you are doing the right thing for the team and for the wider org, then management might be your calling. And then finally, another quote. My stress shifted from individual task execution to higher level concerns like resourcing, budgeting, and making sure my team was motivated and collaborating effectively. Right now, again, if you see, these are the kind of experiences that managers have. Now, if you like these higher level decision making concerns or tasks, they are still tasks, right? You are planning for resources, you are planning for budgeting, you are keeping the stakeholders engaged and on the same page. They are still tasks, but if you like those level of tasks, you are more manager. But if you don't like those kinds of tasks, and if you like doing tasks like working on technical architecture, working on like a specific design, or creating a new module, then you are more suited for IT role. Now let's move to individual contributor voices. People who are in IC, what do they think? Right now, I have been an IC for a long time. There was a brief time when I became a manager in my previous org, but then I switched back into an IC. Right. So if there are someone who are in IC roles, what do they think? And what do they enjoy or what do they not enjoy? The first quote. I enjoyed being able to dive deep into specialized technical work in my role. I was able to get hands on and see tangible results rather than overseeing projects at high level. So, as an individual contributor, we all know that we are very hands on people. Even if we grow up in your ladder and we do less hands on, but we do hands on. I might not be developing the entire module end to end, but I might be developing one module and showing the best practices for others to follow. The second quote. The autonomy was nice, but the career progression eventually plateaued. I feel like I needed to move into management to continue advancing and developing new skills. And this is very common observation that IC feels, right? And it's twofold. First of all, a lot of companies do not have that career path defined. And we'll talk about the career ladders in the third section, right? We are currently looking at the second section. That a lot of companies do not have that career path defined. And that obviously makes, moving into management as the natural progression, something that happened to me in my previous org, because we are not aware that there is a possibility of go beyond, grow beyond this level as an individual contributor. So you feel that your progression has plateaued. And then it's also like, moving into management, you develop new skills. Like stakeholder management is a skill that is, I would say, everybody should be somehow like learning or developing. Conflict resolution, these are like, there are few skills which might not be technical but are very important skills, which makes you learn even in your life, right? So that's one part. Having said that, thankfully now a lot of companies do provide a advancement in your career as an IC, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Finally, the third quote: as an IC, I appreciated having more control over my schedule. I could really focus in on the mastering my field versus balancing multiple priorities and people. So that's another important point. What you enjoy and what you not enjoy as a manager, you will have to balance multiple priorities and people. There is no way you cannot. It's not anymore about you as an individual, it's about your team, right? So you need to balance multiple things. But as an IC, yes, you have that, like a perk of choosing what you need to work on. Still, you need to be aligned with your team goals and your company goals, but you'll have more flexibility on doing things. So those were the voices. And now that moves us to career ladder. But let me quickly look into the questions if you have any. A manager is mostly working to improve the working of team, in the process losing focus on his or her personal growth and areas of improvement. So this is where I kind of agree but have a mixed feeling. It depends upon, so like the best managers that I have worked with, I have understood that they focus on their personal growth in different areas. They focus on developing their leadership skills. They focus on how they can become better leaders. And that's why I generally say that, if you have become a manager, then you need to somehow start letting go of the technical skills a bit. I'm not saying go completely off, never. You cannot afford to do that. But you need to start focusing your personal growth in terms of different areas, because think about this, that you are moving towards a like a position where you'll be managing more people. So initially you might be just managing 2 or 3 people or 5 people, but as you progress in your career, let's say if you move to a director engineering position or a CTO position, you will be depending upon the size of the org, you will be managing somewhere between 50 to 500 to probably 50,000 people. So that's a different level of skills that you need to develop over the time, and it's not easy. It's, believe me, it's a lot harder managing people than doing work yourself. Now let's see what Devesh says. What is the solution if you're at a cusp of both? Like you're a good IC and a good manager as well, but you don't want to be a core IC or a core manager, but want to have a flavor of both. Yeah, there is a section. Is there a sweet spot? We'll talk about it. Okay, so let's talk about the career ladder. And it's very important, as I said, to understand what career paths does your organization have for you to grow. as well as what and there might be a possibility that your current org might not be having that. Then you might think about like, okay, let's move to an organization that has those level of growth path that is aligned with you. So you have to think very long term. Or let's say, like if you're starting to looking out for jobs, then what we think about is terms of work culture. We think about the compensation that we get, so on and so forth, but also talk about the growth part that you will be having, right? Like, so that when you are moving to organization, you're moving to organization for a long term. Not necessarily you'll stay there for long term, but you cannot move to a new organization thinking that, okay, I'll find another job in 2 years. So it's always better when you get inside to understand what career paths they have, which one of them aligns to you, and then accordingly make that decision. So have that also as one of your criterias when you think about, like choosing from multiple jobs, and if you're searching out. Now, go ahead and read this article of the Holloway. I like this article, like the job title levels, fundamentals of software engineering. It might not be applicable in each and every scenario, but it's a quite generic, like path. Now, most people start as an engineer, like software engineers, and they start growing up. And with few years of experience, you'll have to make a decision whether you want to continue growing as an IC or you want to become a manager. Now, the paths for each would look like that. In case if you become a manager, obviously, you'll start with a smaller team. And this is a very simplified version. There'll be more levels in between. But you'll ultimately start growing into becoming a director, a VP, and a CTO. I know like different companies have different, like terminologies, like, banks, they have VPs and then directors above them. It's vice versa in other companies. So it what it signifies is that once you make this decision, make a very conscious decision. You can always do a back and forth between these. As I said, I know people who have done a back and forth between these roles within your current org, not necessarily changing the org. Within your current company, you can do those. But this is how it would look like. As I said, it's a good thing now that companies have started actually providing this path for individuals to grow. So what I've done is that uh, I've just, was searching to see that if any companies have made their path public. So I was able to find EPAM article in which they have made their growth path public, right? So they wanted to to attract talent. It's always better if you can like have those like blogs in which you can tell your prospective candidates or employees that how their growth path would look like. So they've created these three different tracks. Obviously, you'll start with software engineer, lead software engineer, but then there will be a decision point where you will want to become a manager. You can become a solutions architect, or you can become a chief software engineer. Now, again, terminologies in every company would differ. This is for EPAM, and I'm not even sure, like if it is, like current or not. I'll have to check the date of the article. But yeah, this is a public article. So if you see there, engineering manager level 1, level 2, senior engineering manager, you become a director, you become a senior director. In terms of engineer, you become a chief software engineer 1, 2, then become an associate principal software engineer, then you become a principal software engineer, then you become a distinguished software engineer. Some companies use staff, some company use principal. So there are different terminologies, but there will be a hierarchy for people to grow in an IC role. And if you become an architect, then you have solutions architect 1, 2, senior solutions architect, lead solutions architect, and a principal solutions architect. So try and understand this level of career path that you can have in your current organization or in your potential organization. And that will actually help you define your own goals and milestones. And even if you defined a specific goal, and let's say you started moving towards that path, and at certain point you felt that no, you want to try something different, most companies will help you, like have those internal lateral transfers and try it out. So don't shy away from doing that. Now, this is an article that I found on the progression.co, where it talked about the roles that Amazon engineering has. As an individual contributor, when someone joins Amazon, they join as a SDE, Software Development Engineer 1. And their growth path looks like SDE 2, SDE 3, then Principal SDE, Senior Principal SDE, and Distinguished Engineer. But let's say here, if they plan to become managers, so they can become a SDM, that is Software Development Managers, and then grow accordingly. So we have internally levels L5, L6, and accordingly you can start moving. The senior SDM is equivalent to principal SDE. Director is equivalent to senior principal SDE. So if you see that individual contributors have a growth path to go up to VP level. So if you see, it's L5, L6, L7, L8, and then we have L10. So you can grow up till that in Amazon. And most companies would be now having these tracks, parallel tracks for individual contributors. Like similarly, we have a track for solutions architects. So there will be associate solutions architect, then solutions architect, then senior solutions architect, principal solutions architect, then senior principal solutions architect, and then distinguished. So there are roles. Still, after like understanding it from other people experiences, going through the roles and responsibilities, I'll also share some books at the end as a further reading, which will help you to understand the roles of IC versus managers, and what the path look likes, what the growth look likes in each of the roles. But even after all of that, if you are not able to make a decision, then you can try both roles and decide what suits you best. So, and gaining experience in both management and IC roles can provide valuable perspective, right? So, to start with, you can take a stretch assignment as an acting manager or by shadowing a manager. That's the easiest way. You can simply talk to your manager saying that, yeah, I want to eventually think about moving a management role, but I'm not sure. So, I would like to try it out. Is there something that I can help you? And believe me, as managers, they love people who can take off some of their load. They are already very overloaded. So if someone comes and talks to them that, can I help you out? They'll be more than happy to give you some, like a task so that you can, like start getting feel of the kind of work that they do. Or if you want to see whether or not you want to progress as a senior IC or to become a principal IC or a staff IC, you can always take a more complex project. And again, people would love you to take more complex projects if you want to, and understand whether or not something that you would enjoy doing it in the long term. Try both if you would like to, and see that what has bring you more like happiness, enjoyment, fulfillment in the day-to-day responsibilities. And then reflect on your strengths. That's very important. What happens is that a lot of times we start focusing on our weaknesses, that what I like to fill the gaps, instead of thinking about filling the gaps, think about how you can leverage your strengths, right? So that's what you would be good at, that's what you enjoy it, and that's how you'll be able to grow it. So like as an IC, if you feel that your strength is more when you orchestrate things, when you help other people's, and you are a bit lacking in technical, then don't think that you are weak in technical and you need to like start leveraging, or start, like honing your technical skills. That is something required. But probably even if you do a lot, you might not enjoy. So because you're more good at orchestrating things, try a stretch role with a manager and see if you are able to excel there, so that you can leverage your strengths, and vice versa. Is there a middle ground or a sweet spot? There are roles, obviously, like team lead or your technical track lead, where you get the best of both worlds. You are an IC and you're also a manager, because there are few people reporting to you. So you are responsible for their growth, for their promotion, and you still, spend more than 50% of your time doing an IC. So yes, there are roles and there are people who will be interested in both. But from my experience, what I have seen is that once you start growing in your career, right, it's good till the time you are in, SD1, SD2, SD3, SDM, like at that level of roles, yes. But when you start moving to higher level roles, leadership, you need to be choosing one of them. Harsh truth, but that's how you will be able to grow further, because you need to find your specialization, whether it is management or your individual, technical things. Unless that happens, you would not be able to, like get into a leadership position, at a position where you have a say. You still might be having say at a, but the growth would be faster if you double down on your strengths. And that has been my experience. If there might be other companies which help you do both, then that's great. I know that a lot of managers, they love being hands on and they keep doing hands on, which is good. But let's say you are able to do that when you are handling 5 people or 10 people or 15 people. So if you have 15 people in your team, generally a manager should be doing a 101 with their reportees either once a week or once every 2 weeks. Do not, wait till once in a month to have that 101 with your reportees. So let's say you're managing a team of 15 people, and then you do 101 once in 2 weeks. So daily you have 101 to do. Very soon you would start feeling that as the team size grows for you, you will not be having time for your hands on. And if you still want to do hands on, then obviously either your work life balance would get impacted, or you would see that you will not be able to handle a team of 50 people, let's say. Right? So you need to, there will be a point where you have to make a decision. And even as an IC, you can grow as far as you would like. And that's one of the reason that currently I want to continue grow as an IC, because it's still, there is no one who is reporting to me, but still I'm able to impact the career lot of people by mentoring them. I'm helping them get promoted. I'll not be responsible for their promotion, but I'm providing them opportunities so that they're able to do the work at their next level and make a case for their promotion. So you have to think about what you need to do, and there's no rush to do it. It's good to be in that juncture where you are deciding where you want to go. Take as much time as you would like, try both, speak to as many people as possible. For me, I have very closely seen few of my managers, observed what they do on a day-to-day basis, and then decided that in this current phase of my life and career stage, I would like to continue growing as an IC. It's a more difficult path, frankly, but that's what I would enjoy more. Because though as a career path for a manager it might be easier, but because I might not enjoy, it will be more difficult for me to grow in that. As an IC, I'm currently enjoying what I'm doing. So though career path might look difficult, but because I enjoy it, it's fine for me. So there is no Straightforward answer, unfortunately, it is based on individual to individual to find their own calling. All this session can help you probably is, like give some clarity about what the role would look like. Now, obviously, finding the right fit is up to you. Evaluate your career values, interests, and strengths. Whether, again, this is very important. Whether your strength is individual brilliance or enabling group brilliance. If you're someone who would like an individual accolade versus a team accolade, think about that and accordingly go for it. And choose the role with the best growth opportunities for you, right? And let's say you have made the career decision. You want to be an IC or you want to be a manager. Then what mistakes you should be actually avoiding, right? What not to do as a manager? Let's first look into the manager mistakes. The first is micromanage your team rather than delegating appropriately, something that almost every new manager might get trapped into. They might not feel that they are doing it, but it happens. So you need to be very conscious about that. Take credit of your team's work instead of highlighting their contributions. So you have just moved from an IC role into a manager role. As an IC, you used to get all the limelight because you were doing the work. As a manager, you need to ensure that you are providing that limelight to your team instead of taking that limelight. It's very difficult initially, but you need to ensure that you need to provide that credit to your team. If not, then you'll struggle being a manager. As a manager, you need to over communicate. You cannot be under communicate things, the plans and the expectations that you have from individuals in the team and other teams on the broader org. You need to communicate as much as possible. You cannot avoid difficult discussions. So as a manager, if you're avoiding difficult discussions, then you're falling into the trap. You need to have those difficult conversations before they become ugly. One of the hardest thing as a manager you'll have to do is to let people go. Tell them that they are not performing well, and that is why they are either put into PIP, which is performance improvement plan, or something like that, whatever the organization has, but something that as a manager you'll have to do at some point of career stage. And if that is something that you're not comfortable with, you'll have to develop that skill, that how you can do that. Be empathetic. It does not give us a license to be I don't want to use the words, but yeah, it does not give us license to be rude. But you need to be empathetic, but you need to be able to communicate those decisions to the employees. Blame your team for the failures. If there is something that is not working or it is a failure, then that's where a true manager comes out, taking the accountability about the team's failure. As an IC, what you should be avoiding or what you should not do. First is pursue solo projects without collaborating cross-functionality. It's not the case. As an IC, probably as a junior IC, you are just working on the task that you are being given, but always try and understand why this particular task and how it fits in the bigger picture, and then collaborate cross-functionally. It's not that you will be working in a silo at all. Yeah, keeps your head down without sharing expertise with colleagues. It's not only managers' responsibility to grow people. As an IC, it's our responsibility also to grow other people. As an IC, we do gain experience and expertise over time, and more deep expertise. So as much as we can help the juniors and our colleagues get that same thing, it's beneficial. So it's not that I'm going to come into office, work what I've been given and go. That never works like that. Resist participating in team brainstorming and planning. It should not be like, as an IC, your voice is very important, right? So ensure that you put that voice. Otherwise, what will happen in the initial team planning and brainstorming, you'll not put your voice, and then when the task comes to you, you'll be like, oh man, this is not something that we should be doing. Then why did you not tell it upfront? So something that you should be very conscious about. Do only the bare minimum rather than driving impactful results. Again, I know if you want to grow as an IC, you cannot just think about, like, I'll do the task that I have been given and that's pretty much. You need to think about the whole, like, how you're making a larger impact. As an IC, you need to keep learning. If you It's not about what you know, it's about what it can be and what you can learn. So even before cloud came, right, there were ICs who are doing really well and they're on-prem. Let's say, I'm just giving an example. And when a new technology came, cloud, now there's like AI has come up, right? Generative AI. So we as ICs need to learn those new things and ensure that our org adopts those things and progress towards those things. Otherwise, we'll be left behind. So, with that, I'll touch upon the one final thing. I know we are almost about time. So, if you want to become a great manager, become a great individual contributor first. And don't take my words, take words of Steve Jobs. So I'm going to read the quote that Steve Jobs has said. And if you can find the video, there's a just search the video on the YouTube. You'll be able to find. It's a great thing that he says. We were going to become a big company, and he's talking about Apple, obviously. And we thought, let's hire professional managers. We went out and hired a bunch of professional management, and it didn't work at all. They knew how to manage, but they didn't know how to do anything. They can manage, but they were not sure how anything can be done. So the best managers, who they are great individual contributors who never ever want to become a manager, but decide they want to become a manager because no one else is going to be able to do as good a job as them. So question people ask is how soon we should become a manager, or they feel that they should get the next promotion as soon as possible so that they can become the manager as soon as possible. It might be good in the short term. You get that position, you get that compensation hike that you got with the promotion. But in the long term, unless you hone your skills as I see and understand how things are done, do not rush to become a manager. As I said, becoming a manager is not a promotion. It's a different profession. So before you do that, try and become proficient in your current profession as an IC. With that, I'll leave you with few books that are really good to understand this. One is Making of a Manager by Julie. She became a manager at the age of 25 when she was working with Facebook. She was a fresh graduate, was as a designer in the Facebook team for a few years. And then she had to become a manager because their team grew from one or two people to more than 5 or 6. And then someone had to lead that. So she had to become a manager, and she shares her experience of how manager is made. Like, she says that managers are not born, managers are made. So she talks about the making of a manager. Will Carl Larson, he was CTO of Calm, and now he's CTO of another company. He talks about staff engineer, like what that is leadership beyond management track, that how you can be a leader without being a manager, how the growth path that you can have as an IC. And then there are two other books which are really good by O'Reilly, the series, The Manager's Path and The Staff Engineer's Path. So pick and choose which books you would like to read, which path you would like to grow. And with that, it's a wrap. I know we are over time, but I'm happy to take any questions. And thank you so much for listening. So let me look into the questions if we have any. I'm not sure till which level we have looked into previously. The slide was not visible. Which slide was not visible? I'm so sorry for that. Anyways, we'll be sharing the slides with you, so it should be fine. So Devesh, hopefully this question got answered. Cusp of both. Yeah, there's no straightforward answer, but yeah, once you move to senior positions, try and choose one path. What is the level of an SA? So SA has multiple levels. You start with an associate SA, then you go to solutions architect, then you go to senior solutions architect, then you go to principal solutions architect, then you go to senior principal solutions architect. So they are the path, parallel to the SD track that you saw, the same track we have for solutions architect also. Navina says, one issue I face being a manager role is in a product company is you expected to code anytime, but you lose hands-on when you're a manager for some period and find it difficult to start coding. I agree. So you cannot fully lose touch, but I generally say that once you're becoming a manager, ideally it should not be required for you to code. You need to be like reviewing the code if needed and those kinds of stuff. But if you are involved or troubleshooting it, or if in case of emergency, you might be fixing a defect or something. But as a product manager or in a manager role, if you are involved in coding a product from the scratch, might not be the best thing. I'm trying to find other question. Doesn't the IC role has more responsibility with respect to technical accuracy and feasibility of project delivery? Yes, they do have more responsibility in terms of technical accuracy. Yes, in feasibility. Yes. Compare that with manager responsibility, ensuring the right mix of people are involved, the right resource allocation is done, it is done within the timelines, it is done within the budget. So there are different kinds of responsibilities that a IC would be having and a manager would be having, and both are equally important. You can have the best technical accuracy and the best feasibility, but if the budgeting and the resourcing and the timelines are not done, the end impact to the customer will not be there. So both needs to be there. How do you identify roles which are more managerial and extend to IC rather than core IC role? Any criteria to look for in the JDs as keywords or example roles with AWS? So in AWS specifically, we have very specific, either you are a IC or you're a manager. Being a manager, you can always get involved in a IC work. As I said, it's possible. It's up to you how much hands-on you would like to be. But once you start growing, you might find it more and more difficult to spend time on IC work because it's more about helping your team. So if you talk about job description, you don't even need to go into job description. You can simply look into the title, and that will let you know whether it is a manager role or it is an individual contributor role. It's a clear demarcation that we have. Feedback and appraisal part is the hardest. Exactly, it is the hardest, and because that involves humans, right? And human interactions, believe it or not, it should be easy, but it's never easy. But then how to answer the question like what you did as a manager? It's your team who did the work. Again, probably another session altogether on this. We will talk about, we should be having a session on leadership principle answerings and what kind of questions are asked to a manager and what kind of questions are asked to an IC. But there are a lot of things that as a manager you do to help your team. You remove all the roadblocks that the team are facing. So very quickly, if you need to talk about something like that, you will talk about one of my IC was struggling because of this particular thing. I realized that, and I ensured that we either enable that IC so that that roadblock is removed, or we involve other person, we get another team's help. We need to always talk about cross team dynamics, how you're helping other people, rather than IC was struggling, so I rolled up my sleeves and started doing the stuff. That's a probable solution, but that does not show your leadership capabilities. That shows that you are good as an IC, but you are actually moving into leadership roles. So you need to think about how you can help others without you personally doing that job. Okay. Solutions architect roles are IC roles. So we have solution architect managers. They are managers of solutions architects. And but asset solution architect in itself is IC role. So I'm a principal solutions architect. It's a IC role. I have a manager who is a manager of solution architecture, and he has like 6 of us under him, like who report to him, right? So yeah, cool. That's all the questions that I can see in the chat here. Thank you so much. I know we are 10 minutes more than the scheduled time. But yeah, I absolutely loved delivering it and absolutely loved the questions that I have had, and yeah, love the interaction that we all have. So thank you so much.
That was interesting, Prasad. Lots of insightful information. My suggestion would be whatever works for you, be the best in that. Whether you are a IC or a manager, there is always a growth path for anyone who is best at any of these things. So great insight. And we would be posting this presentation on the resources page. So you would be able to grab the links from there. If any of the link is not working, please let us know and we would correct it so that everyone can get benefited. So thanks for the session, Prasad. It was engaging and hopefully people have made a lot of decision point from it or at least got a direction, and we want to include these type of topics. So any suggestions you have, if we have expertise or if we can reach out to internal team for those type of expertise, let us know and we would try to incorporate those topic. And feedback is important. If you like something, maybe a slide from the presentation, feel free to share it on LinkedIn. It would help you to build your own network. People would look up to you that you are attending something interesting and maybe sharing this, so that would also help you as an individual when you start sharing your knowledge. So that's all. Thank you so much, Parna. Thank you for taking care of questions. She is behind the scene and managing all the things. So thank you so much. And we hope to see you next week. We have interesting presenters coming next week too. And we would be having more interesting discussion to follow along. Have a good one. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.